I know, this video is so 2022. When you look at the two Pinocchio movies from 2022, Disney's live-action remake and the one made by Guillermo del Toro, it is immediately obvious to anyone that while the movies are based on the same story, they cannot be more different. They are made differently, there are different characters and story points, even expectations were different. Disney's live-action remakes are often viewed as a lazy way to get some nostalgia money. Meanwhile, Guillermo del Toro is a guy who can literally make a movie about a woman falling in love with a fish and it would get an Oscar. Oh, and his Pinocchio did get an Oscar too, for Best Animation, with some real tough competition. Meanwhile, Disney's Pinocchio sits with a pretty low 5.1 rating on IMDb and an absolutely abysmal score on Rotten Tomatoes. But I am not here to bash or praise these movies. There are already many others doing that. I am here because while watching these movies, I suddenly felt, hey, that looks kinda similar to what I've seen in the other one. And you may say, of course it is similar. It is based on the same story, what are you even talking about? And the best way I can describe it, I feel like at some points in the movies, the creators just had similar ideas, which resulted in similarities that go beyond the general Pinocchio story. So now I want to look at those in detail. Before I start, I have to mention that I, like most people, am not familiar with the original novel, and most of my Pinocchio knowledge comes from Disney's 1940 animation, so using that as a reference, I will try to point out instances of similar ideas in the movies that were not present in the original animation, and see how they affect the story. And we're immediately starting with a big one. In both movies, Geppetto has lost his son, and is making Pinocchio in his image. In 1940 animation, there were no such implications, and Geppetto made a wish upon a star simply on a whim, and then accepted a living puppet as his son. In Disney's remake, we can hear Geppetto reminiscing while making Pinocchio, and we clearly see his son's picture on his workbench. Del Toro's movie goes further and shows the complete backstory with Carlo's death and Geppetto's depression and alcoholism after. This has a similar effect on the character of Geppetto in both movies, giving him a new trait. He wants Pinocchio to be like his late son, and that in turn allows for his character development towards the end of the story when he learns to accept Pinocchio for who he is. By the way, did you know that lying is okay sometimes? Well, it is, honest. In both movies, Pinocchio uses his nose-growing superpowers to overcome an obstacle, and this one is not even a new idea. Shrek 2 already did this gag, and Disney's movie pretty much repeats the same scene. Nose grows to help characters get out of captivity. In Disney's remake, this choice is made primarily as a way to solve the problem, because the blue fairy appears only once in the movie, unlike the old animation, so she was not there to help. Del Toro's version uses nose growing during escape from inside the sea monster, and I think this is a purely visual choice. In this movie, Pinocchio's nose becomes an actual tree as it gets longer, and the sea monster scene gives enough space to really show how far that can go. What about making friends? In both movies, Pinocchio meets sympathetic characters in the puppet theater. It is Fabiana in Disney's remake and Spazzatura in Del Toro's version. This feels like a similar idea to show more friendly characters, but characters themselves and their stories are obviously very different. Fabiana is immediately sympathetic to Pinocchio. She helps him during and after the performance, though she is not able to help him escape directly. She also appears once more before Pinocchio goes out to look for the sea monster. This time she represents the puppet theater without Stromboli, who is arrested, and offers Pinocchio to join again. However, he must first find Geppetto, a decision which, through a magic of making the right choice, cures him of donkey ears and tail. That way, Fabiana's role in the story is to present Pinocchio with a tempting but sympathetic choice, so he can make a morally correct decision. Spazzatura is at first complicit in getting Pinocchio into Count Volpe's grasp. Spazzatura gets jealous of Pinocchio's success, but eventually they join together against Count Volpe's abuse and ruin his circus by sabotaging the main show. While Pinocchio is taken away, Spazzatura remains with Count Volpe as his pet and servant. Later they find Pinocchio again, and Spazzatura finally makes a choice to oppose Count Volpe directly, just as Pinocchio is about to be burned. After escaping the sea monster, Spazzatura ends up living with Pinocchio and Geppetto. In the end, Spazzatura provides less growth for Pinocchio, but has its own pronounced character arc. I will point out that both characters talk to Pinocchio through their puppets, which is a definite similarity. Okay, this one is extremely minor, but these were the scenes that made me want to make this video in the first place. In both movies, a character becomes a boat engine to escape the sea monster. In Disney's remake, it's Pinocchio himself, rotating his legs really fast. In Del Toro's version, it's Spazzatura rotating its tail. Here the ideas feel absolutely the same, and in both versions the visual gag has no real effect on the story. If the author wants, characters could escape without that. So in both cases, the creators of the movie decided that it would just be a fun thing to add to the scene without any big meaning behind it. And of course another big thing is at the very end. Pinocchio is not turning into a real boy in both movies, though Disney's remake is more ambiguous and open-ended in that regard. But this connects to the very first similarity I mentioned. Initially Geppetto wanted Pinocchio to turn into a real boy, into his late son. But in the end he understands that Pinocchio cannot be anyone else but Pinocchio, and accepts him for who he is.
Pinocchio, when you first came to me, I might have made you think I wanted somebody else. But it was you I was wishing for. You will always be my real boy.
You are here, my dear son. Can't you see me? You're alive. You're so free. I need you.
With how truly different these movies are, it is kinda amazing that there are very similar changes to the story and characters made to present the same message at the end. Those were the similar ideas I have noticed. There are enough movies, similarly created from the same idea and at the same time, that are very different. Often it would be hard to find similarities between them other than that basic premise. But both Pinocchio movies from 2022 present a unique example of works that have originated from the very same story, went in very different directions with that story, and ended up creating new similarities between each other. Truly an unexpected example of you and I are not so different after all. And that is all I have to say for today.